Okay, so my name is Trent Fowler, and I'm pleased to welcome you to the DaVinci Institute for our March speaker series event on the rise of the female entrepreneur. So I think we all know on some level that we can't live in the best possible world if the entrepreneurial talents of fully half the population are not being cultivated and allowed to thrive. And yet for thousands of years, to our collective detriment, this is precisely the situation in which we've been mired. And over the past couple of decades, at long last, we've begun to make some progress on this front. Year over year, women are a larger fraction of college classes. Women are a larger fraction of the workforce, more or less across the board. They're a larger fraction of people buying goods and services, and a larger fraction of the people who are starting and running companies that provide those goods and services, all of which is cause for optimism. And yet, we still find ourselves plagued by these persistent and tricky issues around how identity plays out over the course of a career and how social pressures influence the kinds of lives we choose to lead. And we could scarcely hope to have a more qualified and star-studded panel to walk us through this territory. So we're really excited to have all of you here and to have them here as well. And before we get started on that, I believe, is it Thomas, are you going to say some things about the DaVinci Institute?
Let me do this and we'll put you on.
Okay. And don't either.
Yeah,
There you
I
go.
know it gets confusing. Good evening. My name is Antonio Lazzardi. For those of you who don't know me, I'm president of Creative Connections as well as CATS, the Colorado Arts and Technology Series. We also work here with Tom and Mikkel, okay, and Trent on putting these programs together. How many of you have been to a DaVinci Institute program in the past? Can I see the hands? Very good, very good. Also, I'd like to know how many people in the room are either self-employed or run a micro company. Can I see those hands? Wait, this is, Tom, this is pretty steady from group after group. So we always like to know who's in the room. This gives our illustrious panel an opportunity to see a little bit of who and what you are. We don't do what regular groups like this do, in that we do not ask our panel members to introduce themselves. You've got a flyer with a brief rundown on their background. We like to just cut to the chase and get you guys going. So please forgive us for the informal thing. Besides, I've been through a lot of these programs where the speaker got up and it was a 10-minute introduction. Honest to God, and there was no double spacing. It was like, there was 10 minutes of ungodly stuff. I have finally come to a conclusion. The longer the introduction, the more boring the person is. And that's why they get a long introduction. I've lectured, guest lectured, or lectured for 15 universities and colleges, and I'm here to tell you that's a fact. You can take that one to the bank. Aside from that, I'd like to draw your attention to several different things. April's next month, isn't it? Thank you. In April, we're doing the Brain Series. The Brain Series, we have 3 different programs. One at Creative Connections, another one at CATS, Colorado Arts and Technology, and one here at the DaVinci Institute on the brain. CATS is doing the Business Brainiac. We're having people who have a background using their brain. I know it's kind of a strange thing to say today in a society that seems to be asleep at the wheel, but we have those type of people. And at Creative Connections, we are going to have a panel that's going to talk to the issue of how the brain works for the creative. But this is the program I always enjoy, because we sort of here somehow find a way of going off the ragged edge. By the way, that's not a hint. You guys don't have to do it. Our very first program here was Techno-Apocalypse. And it was a wonderful program. How many of you caught Techno-Apocalypse? Yeah. Well, I know you were on the panel. Thanks, Michael.
Did not raise my hand?
No, that was very good. I was just checking to see if you were present. At any rate, that was really good. And that panel was on its best behavior. They did a stellar job on how the world's going to change and the technology's coming in and all that great stuff. And right at the end, I swear, Rod Serling came through the door, and I heard this little voice go, and now it's time for the Twilight Zone. And our panel went dystopian, and I sat in the back of the room and go, I love it. At any rate, that was then. Keep in mind, we're doing the future of the brain next month here. So I'm expecting to hear a lot of things that I've been reading about, including chips in the brain and things of that nature. At any rate, please join us. For those of you who run your own companies, on the third Thursday of this month at CATS, at the Colorado Lending Source, the information is in your handout. We're doing attracting, recruiting the right advisory team. And for those of you who own your own business and you think you can do it on your own, please don't. About 90% of all businesses fail within the first 5 years. And that's usually because the business owner sees and meets with his advisory or her advisory team every morning. And it's in the mirror, it's me, myself, and I. I do the same thing, and I'm here to tell you, the guy in the mirror is no smarter than I am. Just isn't. And he's a liar. Because I know what I look like. I look like a 35-year-old Robert Redford. So that guy in the mirror is a real put-on. Tom, I've announced the meeting's coming up. They know what we're doing here next month. Please come back. Every panel is very different, okay? This one's going to be stellar, Tom.
All right, real quick. If you haven't been to the DaVinci Institute before, just walk around, and we have, this is a very fascinating collaborative workspace environment here, and we have a few primo offices with views of the mountains, so let us know if you're interested in that. I would also like to introduce Michael Cushman here. Michael Cushman heads up our consulting department at DaVinci Institute, and if there's anything that we can help you with, please stop us afterwards and say hi. But I don't want to take up all your time here because we've got a fascinating panel here. So thank you for joining us, and let's open the floor here. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Anna Burrell. I will be your moderator this evening. So let's go ahead and just jump right in, because I'm super excited for this. To start off, I would like to address this question to each of you in turn.
You want to put it up closer?
I would like to address this question to each of you in turn. What would you say are some of the main differences in how women approach entrepreneurship as opposed to how men have classically approached it? We'll start.
Good evening.
Well,
Good evening.
I usually have a big voice. Is this okay? No.
All right. Okay. All right. I think that I think it was 2013, Forbes declared that the year of the female entrepreneur, and so we've seen an incredible rise. I think in the last 5 to 6 years, and a lot of changes, and that has to do a lot with I think a phenomenon that is, if you can see it, you can be it. There was a woman named Marie Wilson who was the head of the White House Project, which focused on getting women elected to office, and that was one of her favorite phrases, and I think that that's true. But typically, we see 2 or 3 things with female entrepreneurs. One is they tend to be a little bit older than male entrepreneurs, and so they have had some professional experiences and come to it at a different stage of life, perhaps a stage of life where they are in some ways more mature in their professional areas, but also they are more risk averse because they tend to have families behind them and really need to be able to pay for things up front. So that's one piece. And then another piece that we see that is really different is that the source of money for women tends to be very different. So we know, and I'm sure that you're all familiar with the statistics, but most of the venture capital funding goes toward males. Depending on what sector you're looking at, it's anywhere from 90 to 98% of that money is going to male entrepreneurs, and largely because it's men making those decisions. We think that that's a big piece of it. But women, as a result, tend to fund their own way and get more into debt up front, which drives the different kinds of decision making. And then the third piece that I would say that is true is, I never want to oversimplify or overstate anything and be stereotypical, but women tend to be more collaborative. And so there's a lot more partnerships that we see, an ability to ask for help, less about being self-critical. And so I think those are 3 of the big differences in my mind.
Thank you. I'm going to piggyback off that. Before I do, though, because I noticed that my email address, I know that if you're trying to get a hold of me, I'm not trying to ignore you, but the L is missing. It's L. Calkins in this little brochure, so I'm sure that was probably on me. I apologize, but L. Calkins is my email address. So, okay, so I'm going to piggyback off that. And I was digging into some more research related to raising capital and funding. And there's an interesting component of it that women tend to do, and that is that women are more conservative and they don't overstate their projections. See, they're more realistic in their numbers, but when they're pitching to investors, investors assume that women entrepreneurs are which are often the men are running the VCs and the capital, and they assume they're operating just like men. And so because most men inflate their numbers significantly more, that when the VCs are looking at the women and the investments, they assume they're overinflated, and so they downgrade all of those numbers significantly like they would. So sometimes the realistic scenarios are that women have to understand how they're doing things differently than men so that they can, if you're presenting to men and your goal was funding, then you have to be thinking a bit differently than you would have. So yes, they're more conservative. Yes, they're going to have numbers that are downgraded or different than their male counterparts would. So the taking risk and the raising capital it's a different approach. And you're right, in our communication style, statistically, we also don't display, it's not just raising capital, it's when you go into the bank and you're asking for a loan or you're trying to negotiate. It's all of your relationships in those negotiations. Women tend to not display the same level of confidence and use the word I. We tend to say we. We tend to not take credit for things. We give the team credit for things. But because men don't, then when there's a female and a male, and if there's a male decision, he doesn't think the woman is as strong. She doesn't appear as confident. So even just changing our language to say I and making sure that we take credit for the things that we've accomplished, which I have to admit is really hard. And even if we just do it 10%, 15% of the times more than we do naturally, at least we're headed in the right direction. So really understanding those differences from an entrepreneurial standpoint. It's not that I'm trying to change all women. My gosh, that's just how we are. But in those situations where it's tough enough to succeed, so many fail, we have to be aware of what those differences are and use information and use this research and use the data to help us get what we want and to help us succeed. And when we succeed, the whole company does. And then there's lots of we, but we might have to use the I a bit more, women. So, Anna, just test out.
For those of you who are looking around and wondering why I'm here, I'm in touch with my feminine self. And my mother was a woman, so that makes me half woman. It's my qualifiers. I tend to think that the times are ripe for women. Certainly there is a rise in women entrepreneurship, but I think more importantly that there is a environment that is perfect for women entrepreneurs. I think that just piggybacking what everybody else is really kind of indicating that women tend to operate differently, and not differently in the sense that, oh, there's this or it's that. My personal belief is that women tend to operate better than the male model. Women tend to lean toward, and this is my observation as well as the numbers out there, there's this thing called feminine principled leadership. And there are 3 basic components of it. That's the stuff that, your mother asks, right? Is everybody okay? Share your stuff and play nice. Because of the fact that that is a more collaborative model, it's a much more effective model, and for the particular time that we exist in right now, it has more capacity and more flexibility and more agile than the typical command and control model usually offered by men. So when we're going into a time of climate change and automation and all of these changes, probably the greatest changes in the history of humanity, I put my money on feminine principled leadership than the old command and control model. And the only reason I say that, no offense, men, but we would not be in a situation where we're facing an extinction level event called climate change had there been probably some women who knew about this back in the 60s and 70s and in the boardrooms when those organizations were making decisions, Exxon in particular, about what was going to happen, that they knew that there was going to be climate change challenges by this time. They knew it, but they said profit was more important. And in my mind, I kept thinking to myself, if there were a group of women in that boardroom at the time, they probably would have asked, no, what, that's going to affect the children. Or how will we eat? And those kinds of questions. So it has more capacity. Feminine principled leadership has more capacity, more flexibility. It's more agile. And especially at a time like this, we need it.
I'm very excited. Hi. So I live online every day. Every day I get to help people tell stories. And what I see is there's a very nurturing aspect of women entrepreneurs online. We tend to open up with each other, share authentically with each other. We support each other, we collaborate on things. But men don't. A man will stand in front of you and tell you why you need to buy this item, but will he share how he authentically got to this place where he is in his life? Not so much. But the woman, we've come to a place where we've supported each other, collaborated with each other, nurtured each other, held each other's hands, given each other advice. Men aren't necessarily open to that in the same space. I grew up in the world of technology. I went to school to become a computer networking geek, if you will, and I love every second of my ones and zeros. In that space, it was very men-driven, and to fight for my education in that space was one thing, then to fight for my job in that space was a completely different one. So to come into entrepreneurship, knowing my place, knowing I didn't have to fight, there's a certain empowerment that we have to be able to say, you know, this is my value, this is my gift, and I don't have to prove it to anybody. And I just feel like there's such a more competitive nature with men in the entrepreneurial space where I don't have competition, I have collaborative partners, you know, and they're my sisters, if you will. But I mean, it's that type of relationship. And that's just what I've seen in the environments that I'm networking, and especially because of online. The male marketing approach is more aggressive, more lead generation focused. Ones and zeros, you know, like the dollar signs. That's where you ladies also focused on dollar signs as well with that, because it's a prominent feature. I'm going to do business. This is what it is. But in this space where I do work, it's all about the relationship. And the dollar signs don't naturally come with the relationship. So it's just a different perspective.
So continuing on the event that's been touched on of storytelling, Holly, particularly for you, in your storytelling experience, regardless of gender, what characteristics do you generally find most helpful for entrepreneurs to get their message across?
Yes. First and foremost, there's always a pain point that you're trying to solve. So if you share that pain point, maybe historically how that's benefited others, the outcome and result of that story can be relatable to someone so they can really grasp that and carry that with them. I can tell you, I give the example of the makeup artist. Ideal customers, anyone who has skin, right? Well, but what if that makeup artist then focused on the adolescent who has acne issues? You probably had 2 or 3 teenagers come to mind that would be a good introduction for her, right? So it's all about narrowing in on that pain point in your story to be more relatable to your audience. So that's the first thing for me. Secondly is keywords. Every word you say matters. So you can make your content searchable, whether it's from your website, your blog, video, or wherever. So that is a key component in your story too. Making sure you use the right words so you're searchable, found, and remembered. So I'll just give those 2 and pass it along.
Oh, actually,
Okay.
so, thank you. this actually segues really nicely into Anne's work with the Colorado Women's College. So lifelong learning is essential to a person's growth and for entrepreneurs in general, but there are often there's nothing in HR reinforcing to make sure that we get that development. Now, with your work with the Colorado Women's College, you're amassing of resources for women to go to find that support. What kind do you think is most relevant?
So what's going on with the Colorado Women's College is the chancellor, which is the first female chancellor at the University of Denver, and I think in some ways it had to be a female chancellor to do this, looked at women's colleges across the country, which had a declining model. So in 1980 there were 250, today there are 43, to give you a sense. And she really said, let's cease this 4-year degree granting program. And instead, let's take a look at what some trends are, and Chet, I hope you can comment on this a little bit, in the future of the workforce and the future of education. So in the workforce, we know that we have to reinvent ourselves. So by the time, on a pretty regular basis, every 3 to 5 years, right? By the time you learn something as a freshman in college, the shelf life of that is finished by the time you graduate. So this 4-year degree model is probably going to come to an end in all of our lifetimes. And so what can we do, reacting to that? How does the education model need to change? And so it's really about taking a look at how do we become a lifelong learning partner for someone? How do we help them at the pivot points? And recognize that maybe not all of the solutions are going to be within the University of Denver, but the solutions might be online. The content and the knowledge is getting commoditized increasingly with Coursera, with Lynda, with Khan Academy. So we become more about transformational relationships, right? Something that can't be commoditized and that can be an accelerator for folks. So the model that we're really looking at has to do with how do you create a self that can be resilient, that can have a growth mindset, and then what can we do to make sure that the personal ecosystem and the professional ecosystems are both taken into account in those areas. So, and we're right in creating this roadmap. So you're like entrepreneur in the making right here. So, so I'll have more details on that as we go, and we're always looking for partners along the way. But I think that's what we're up to.
Did you want to comment? I would love that. Sure.
I absolutely agree. In fact, Thomas and I were just talking about this right at the beginning of the when we first were coming in. The 4-year model is simply not agile enough for the times that we live in. The level of speed of change that's happening is so rapid. Unfortunately, what happens with a lot of 4-year organizations is that they are dedicated to holding on to their cash cow, and because of the fact that they haven't fully developed something else. So they're spinning. And I spoke at a gathering of community colleges not too long ago in Aspen, and I remember they wanted to, I'm sure they're burning me in effigy somewhere in the world, because they were so mad because they kept saying, we're not moving at the speed of the times that exist. And I agree with Thomas that I think that there is going to be some level of, there will be entities that will emerge over the next few years that will be able to capture all of this. And one of you might be one of those people, but there has to be something that fills in that gap and works with the organizations that exist right now. But that's the beauty of entrepreneurship, that you have a level of vision. Those of you who are doing the entrepreneurial journey, you have the level of vision that you should be able to think about exactly what we're saying and spend some time coming up with it, and it'll come to you in a dream, and you'll say, here is that model. It may not work the first time, you might have to tweak it over the years, but it is direly needed, really bad.
Thank you for that. So both Anne and Chet have touched on some major shifts that are happening. So Lisa, with your background in global strategy, what are some of the shifts, if any, have you seen on a global scale as more women are entering the business world?
Well, I think it's interesting because as much as there's similarities, around entrepreneurship around the world, there's still a lot of differences country to country or region to region. So when I look, I've been spending quite a bit of time in Eastern Europe, and when I look at the countries that are in Eastern Europe, it doesn't necessarily feel like it's ahead for men or women. In fact, it often feels like it's 10, 20 years behind. And so what you see is that the trends that worked here in the US and the things that women have been successful at, or whatever their businesses are, or men, those are now taking off in Eastern Europe and some of those other countries. And so to me, the opportunities are that in ideas that might be a bit old in the US, and I live in the technology space, so in the leading edge technology, old isn't really very old to us, but let's call Venmo or whatever peer-to-peer payment network you're using. I've been using that for a while. It doesn't feel so fresh and brand new. It's brand new potentially to other countries. And so because technology has enabled us as entrepreneurs, women and men, to be, there's a pro and a con. The competition is great because it is global and worldwide, but there's also an opportunity in that. And so I think by not looking so locally and not just nationally, but thinking internationally and thinking about how your product or service can be used internationally, and women actually tend to do that. It's that communal, instinctual component of it. And so women do have this advantage as entrepreneurs to take advantage of what's going on globally. I don't necessarily think that it's as easy for women around the world. I actually think we still have it really great here to think globally and to build our businesses and be entrepreneurs. And I still see a lot of the same stereotypes and things that women have had to break through, even more so in other countries. So that's Eastern Europe. It's not the same in every country. It's very different in Asia. It's different in Japan. I would be misspeaking if I said that's like that everywhere. But at least in some of my experiences globally, messages resonate to everyone, and they're excited about it, and they're watching YouTube and reading articles, and just like we are here. And so I just think the global component of it is that those messages relate the same, and women here really have an opportunity to think globally and implement their vision in a global way, and men do as well.
You guys are so cool. Okay, so Anne, this is going to be directed at you, because Lisa, you just referenced some barriers that we still have to break through. So as you're reinventing the Colorado Women's College, creating this basically from scratch, what are some of the biggest hurdles that you're finding, and what is working and what is surprising? Plot twist with a 3-part question.
How many of you have worked in academia? Yeah, one. So when I started at this adventure, some good friends of mine and mentors said this is going to be a really challenging environment. And I'll tell you just a very brief story. When the provost of the University of Denver resigned or retired recently, and he sat with the entire dean's council, and he had these beautiful hand-wrapped packages that he handed out to each one of us. I thought, oh my gosh, this is amazing. There's 20 of us in this room. He's wrapped these packages for each of us. He's chosen these books. He's written handwritten notes. This is what living in this world of learners is like. This is great. And I got home and I opened up the books, and it was a copy of Aristotle's Politic and Machiavelli's Prince. And so I thought, wow, that just says a lot about where we are. So to me, the biggest hurdle really has been that working, we're always subject to market opportunities and market constraints. But I think in particular right now, the Women's College, we're faced with market constraints, but we're also faced with just environmental constraints as a result of being within the university system. And sort of how fast we can or cannot go in that way. But I think one of the things that's working incredibly well is to start with people. And so we have an incredible network of 6,000 alumni. We have also close to 60,000 alumni of the University of Denver alumni. And in that way, we've had a tremendous, it's just been very easy to kind of get the wheels turning. Something else that happened that was really, really, really important is that I accepted this position on October 5th of 2017. On October 13th, I think it was, of 2017, Jodi Kantor dropped the Harvey Weinstein story in the New York Times. And by the time I started the job a week later, my phone was full, my voicemail was full, and it was ringing off the hook. And here's the coolest part, it was men. And it was men who were saying, this is a new environment. I want to make sure that I can stand up and do what needs to be done in this environment. You're a lawyer, you're the head of a women's college, perhaps you have the rules of the game. I don't have the rules of the game, but one of the things that I really firmly believe is that in order for the women's college to be successful, we have to invite men to the table. We need men to be part of the conversation. This has to be inclusive of all genders in order for us to be successful. It's not about the pendulum going all the way back. So in that way, Chad, I think that there's a lot of opportunity for the feminine right now, but I think that it really comes in kind of having both sides of humanity really being there. So having this balance come out.
That actually segues really nice into my next question for Chet, which, how do you feel that women's increasing role in both STEM and STEAM will influence how businesses are organized in a tech-leveraged world?
Just being able to leverage, I think someone said it earlier, that to be able to leverage all of the shoulders at the wheel, especially women who come in with skills and with a perspective, being able to put that into the mix of how organizations work will just basically, I mean, it just doesn't make the organization better for the people who work, but it really makes society better. Because of the fact that the society is changing, it needs its institutions to change too. So you have women now with their sensibilities, their particular sensibilities, and I want to make sure that I emphasize this too, that when we talk about feminine sensibilities, we're not necessarily talking about gender-based. We're talking about women having a leaning toward a particular sensibility, but also all of us have been affected by the male command and control model. So just because you're a woman doesn't necessarily mean that you're automatically bringing this new perspective. You could be very much entrenched into the old world. But combining that sensibility with STEM and STEAM training would be an amazing combination, and I believe very strongly about how it will affect institutions. And I'm talking about entrepreneurial ventures that partner with institutions as well. They will challenge those institutions to become more responsive to those things. So it's just having that level of expertise affecting all aspects of our society, from the entrepreneur to the gigger to the person doing a side hustle. And yet having that level of training, it definitely will affect the foundation of society. And quite frankly, we are at a place where we need society to be able to reimagine itself. And that, there's some pushback in that, of course, because there are people who are making a lot of money, making sure the status quo remains. But in order for us to be flexible enough in order to navigate these next 3 to 5 years, STEM and STEAM trained women inside of all of our institutions and organizations is nothing but good news.
Can I ask a follow-up to that? Absolutely.
I'm so curious about the effect of AI. So we know that what McKinsey's saying that 30% of the jobs will be eliminated sometime between now and 2025. The first round will affect women more. The second round will affect men more. And so in that sense, AI is something that we really need to be paying attention to and re-skilling and retooling people. But here's my other question. If 87% of the coders are white males, what is that doing to our product base? And how do we get around that when you can't get, the pipeline of getting women and people of color into those coding rooms is tough.
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know if you guys have heard about how they're starting to discover that a lot of the automated cars that are coming out have a racist bias, that they can't see people of color. I'm not quite sure how that happens. That makes me not want to walk the streets when autonomous cars are driving around. But for some reason, it may be a reflection of the coding that went in. We don't know, but we do know that there is a hidden flaw that they can't seem to be able to see people of color, so that makes it kind of dangerous. So that it will show up. White male bias may show up in a lot of our programming and the way that we structure create the infrastructure, because everything is now being based certainly around the coders and their work. And the great challenge that we have is that we really do need a kind of a Marshall Plan here in order to forward the idea that we now have to get women and men into the mix, because it doesn't seem to be happening organically by the organizations. I'm sure there are all kinds of ways people think about it, but it's not happening organically, and we do need a federal approach to say, this is what we're going to have to do in order to make sure that our institutions, because now they are being run by coding, reflects our society in general. I just don't believe that it can be done organically, at least not to this point. I don't see evidence of that.
Can I comment?
Absolutely.
So I think there's good news and bad news here. Programmers are white males. Actually, Asians are the highest population. I think people don't realize that, but there's more Asian programmers than white Caucasian male programmers. It is male. The thing about data science and AI is it's not all programmers. So the good news is, in the data science field, AI is about data and data science. And actually, many of the backgrounds are from math and finance, math, data algorithms. And those aren't all men. Those, you'll tend to see women in some of those fields. And women are interested in those fields, and you're going to see that it's not just a male programmer. In fact, the programming tends to be a little less in some of the AI fields, and the rules and the way you look at data and the cleverness, intuitive way, which tends to be a women trait. You're going to see women in data science, and you're going to see women help solve this AI issue. The thing about programming, though, and I hate to say it this way, but women aren't in STEM. There is an increase in women in the biofields and some of the STEM programs that are not the technology. Until we significantly change how we teach technology and the job of technology, women aren't doing it. They're continuing to get out of the field. It's not interesting. It's boring. It isn't. Boys, even if you go to the UI, boys will group around a young boy who has a game, and the other boys will watch the one boy play a computer game. Women don't do that. They're not interested unless it's social, unless there's certain attributes about it. Women aren't going to get into STEM and programming, and you're not going to have all these women programming because of the way we teach it. Now, the great news is we have people who are going to change how we do our teaching and our universities, and we're going to teach it differently, because there are exciting ways that women could get involved in technology, but not today, and not in the next 3 to 5 years, because girls don't care about that. Now, it's interesting, there's these girls, there's a big movement, and it's pretty exciting, about girls coding. But do you know why they're going to the girls coding? Because they're getting to be around other girls without men, and they're doing something they can have an accomplishment with, and they see they coded something and they did something and it was fun and it was cool, and they were with other girls. They didn't want to program in their room on their computer to take it apart and program it by themselves, and they're not doing that any more than they were. So we're worse off, because we're not going to have women programmers for a long time until we change those programs. But don't get scared off by that, because it's fine. Programming is becoming in some ways even more of a commodity. But the data science and the AI and the intuitive thinking, women will get involved in, and we'll have more women doing that. And we'll expand the fields and the way we teach it, and it is fun. The data and the figuring things out and the puzzles, that's like puzzling. Puzzling can be fun with collaboration, and great data science and rules is around collaborative thinking in our data science. So I think there's great opportunities, but it's not the way we were thinking. It's not getting women coding. So don't be worried that there's just a bunch of male coders and they're going to code our AI. That's not really exactly true. You can still be afraid for the next 3 to 5 years. I'm not going to argue that one at all. But I'm just trying to share a little bit of a difference in this whole coding thing. I hope those weren't too technical words and that was easy to understand.
No, that's really helpful.
Yes. So I'm a mother of teenagers, 2 girls who code and have been coding since elementary school. They find STEM fascinating, and in an adult language, I would say sexy. Like it's alluring. They're gamers, right? They're the ones playing the games, and the boys are standing around them. They're the ones writing the code for the games that the boys are playing.
It's because you're the mom.
It's well, right, and I believe that there's a foundation behind that. We as adults can keep things sexy and surprising for these kids coming up, right? You know, through education. Let's make STEM sexier. Let's make it appealing for everyone. Let's make it not, oh, if you do this, you know, that's boring. You know, I sit there and I watch some girls at the middle school and high school level with their phones, taking selfies, provocative shorts, and my girls are like, I can't wear that. I'm just gonna cut my hair off, I'm gonna wear sweats, and I just don't even want to deal with that persona. And it starts with the media, it starts with our homes. We have to let them know it's okay to explore, it's okay to be creative, it's okay to invent, it's okay to mess up. And it's okay to not keep up with the Joneses online. Like, I'm online, but my kids they can't stand how we play. So guys, in 5 to 10 years, how we're marketing online is going to change. Unless we are putting ourselves in there and really representing ourselves authentically in that space, these kids aren't going to be there. So you're not going to be able to market to them. We've got to move and change with them and teach them what it's like to have conversations and to own our uniqueness, so that way they can stand a chance in those spaces. And darn it, my daughter said, Mom, if you didn't always work for yourself, then I wouldn't know what it's like. And I said, no, I always told you. One day you asked me, what can I be? And I said, babe, if you want to be a unicorn, be a unicorn. And it sounds cheesy and stupid, but gosh darn it, that's why it's part of my brand, because I want you to be you and own that so hard that you are just awesome and people gravitate to you. And that's the foundation that I just hope we all as adults can encourage our kids to raise their kids in a way that is just so them owning themselves and not looking at everyone else. Because that's where we're gonna be, guys. They don't wanna be where we are. They don't wanna be like us.
That's true. I'll let that sink in for a moment. Okay, so going off of Holly's comment of the children of the future don't want to be like us, thankfully. Chet, what influence do you see an increased female presence in business having on issues like climate change and income inequality?
Well, I'm gonna answer that question with a story, a brief story. There's an old African proverb about the babies in the river. Stop me if you've heard this one before. There's a town, both sides of the river, and they see babies in it. Someone gets up and says, oh my God, there's babies in the river. We have to do something. So people, of course, do the work. They create this giant bridge and they save the babies from the water. Everybody's excited. They celebrate the people. They develop NGOs and awards and companies and all of those things around those wonderful people saving the babies from the water. Then a woman comes along and she looks and she says, we're not asking the most fundamental question. That is, who's throwing the babies in the water upstream? So what's happened is that we have lived in a kind of structure that focused on people saving the babies from the water. What I'm seeing, the whole aspect of a collaborative, more intuitive approach, is that approach, championed by women, goes upstream. And it asks the question, why are babies being put in the water? Who's doing it? And can we do something else? When I'm looking at all the data, I see that kind of intuitive approach that's happening among women entrepreneurs and visionaries. They are asking the more fundamental questions about why the system keeps creating these problems in the first place. So from my particular perspective, I think that the more that we encourage that kind of approach in women entrepreneurial ventures, because you should know this, those of you who are entrepreneurs, the business end of opportunity is all going to be upriver, upstream. The former business end used to be down in getting the babies out of the water, but the new business end will be, can we create something better? What tools do we need in order to do that? What kind of businesses are necessary in order to solve those particular problems? So if you're thinking about what can be done, especially around climate change, because that will be the conversation of all of humanity for the next 10 to God knows how many years, start up there and ask what problems can be solved upriver. Not down here where we're already here, but upriver, because that's where the investments will be, regulatory action will be there, political action, all the action is going to shift upstream. So my hope is that the pursuit or the direction of the new entrepreneurs will be led by women about the upstream challenge, because they will have a more intuitive approach to what those things are, as opposed to repeating what was done downstream.
Lisa, can you address what role you find diversity plays in the workforce, especially following Chet's comment?
Boy, I'm in the tech space. Diversity is slim. But I think that what entrepreneurs are seeing, and I'll take it to the step of lots of companies are using technology. So it doesn't have to be a tech company, it's a company using technology. And technology has really has enabled women to be, technology has allowed a lot of flexibility, not working necessarily in an office space, being global, which has allowed the age of women starting companies, but the diversity of it. I think we were chatting earlier around, I was reading, and I'm going to have to go find who exactly said it, but it sounded brilliant to me when I read it. And so it basically said, and it was a very successful entrepreneur, and he said, a white male, and he said, I surround myself with someone who is older than me, they see a different perspective, younger than me, less educated, more educated, gender diversity, ethnicity diversity, because that group just challenges all of the thinking. And I think you started off with that, and I think that that's very true, and I think that that's where the diversity will play out, and I'm excited about that because it will solve problems differently. It's not having all women, it's not having just a woman and a man, it's about that thinking differently. And especially I love the whole somebody a lot younger. They have ideas and they're not constrained in their thinking, and they don't think they know how it's supposed to be. And it's just so refreshing to make sure that that age and gender and all of the diversity is looked at for, which isn't how society works today, right? We organize top leaders in any Fortune 500 company, and actually you could probably say in any middle-sized company. It all looks the same. It's people who have experience and have worked their way up and have gotten promoted, and all the C-level looks just about the same. It really does. Oh, maybe there's the token, this person or that person, but their ages are relatively similar. Their experiences are relatively similar. Their industry is relatively similar. And so diversity, by shaking that whole thing up, is what I'm most excited about. And I'm starting to see people admit it and say it and live it. And so that's what's going to excite me the most, is that broad diversity. And that's where we're going to succeed in any of, and you don't have to have them all hired, right? You can have, I'll piggyback off the DaVinci Institute even just said, coming here and meeting people and adding them to your small network creates that diversity. You don't have to hire them all. You can seek that out, and that will help us accomplish great things.
Can I just add real quickly to that? Just real quick. Bill, I truly do believe that we really do, this goes back to something I said earlier, we need a federal, if not a local Marshall Plan, because again, I'm not seeing it happen organically. I see pushback. Even now, people would say, well, there are more people of diverse cultures and backgrounds in the field, in the population, but unfortunately, it's not happening organically. That's my number one concern.
Sorry, guys. Okay, so on that note, we are going to open it up for some questions and answers with the audience. Does anyone have a question for our experts up here? Don't everybody jump at once.
One of the things that fascinates me about microlending in less developed countries is that the lending more often goes to women than to men, and there's reasons for that. One of them is that they pay it back, but it's essential around the element of how women are entrepreneurs with very limited resources and that creativity. So with the discussion that's really been rich around the technology, to the extent that you know about this kind of situation and entrepreneurship in a very resource-limited societies among women, how would you compare the characteristics of women in our realm right now with women in less developed countries?
I think we touched on some of those characteristics in the beginning. They do tend to be more conservative and not and do things very out of their gut and with a community instead of just tasks. And so in those microloans, you're seeing the women have an impact in the community and thinking through and being relatively conservative and earning it back off. And so it may not be the most innovative, wild idea, but it was a sustainable one that created a difference. And so I think it depends on what you're trying to create. There's still diversity in the women as well. Some women are more, I loved how you said we're all influenced by society, and yet we have a very creative woman, raising these girls in such a cool way, which is going to be very different than another woman who's also in a similar position. So there's still a lot of differences in that. But I think those characteristics that you touched upon in the very beginning, that both of you did around they're more conservative, there's the we, the community, creates an opportunity in those particular situations. That doesn't necessarily mean they're going to have a company that made the most money, and that isn't necessarily a bad thing. It depends on the goal and what that company was doing. Maybe they're making a ton of money and giving back a lot of money. You can't just judge that in that way. They might be making a lot of money and reinvesting it into research. So there's lots of different models, and it doesn't mean that women necessarily will end up with the company that, for whatever reason, made the most money. It doesn't mean that they can't run the company that makes the most money. So it's a tricky question in that scenario as far as their personality traits. Entrepreneurial traits are similar among gender, race, age. They are this believe everything is possible. There's a whole bunch of traits like that. They work extremely hard. They do see something beyond what everyone sees. There's a lot of entrepreneurial traits, and those cross genders. And it doesn't matter if they're male or female. They aren't the easiest people to work for. There's a lot of not necessarily positive traits that go along with those as well. And really, entrepreneurs own those, female or male, age, gender, the drive, that desire that makes them successful. Those are all researched and are really kind of similar traits. So.
One other thing that I would add is, if you think about the international population and some of the rights that are not afforded to women in other countries, and think sometimes desperation breeds entrepreneurs. So the person who developed the dishwasher was a woman who was overtasked, and so I think that we see a lot of women who are in really desperate situations who are reaching out and trying to change a family life, change a community, get access, and they receive this micro-lending, which has become a bit of a charged word, I think. Why can't they just be loans? Do they have to be micro-loans? But that's one thing I would say. Another two things that are kind of fun if you want to look at them. The Nike Foundation, and they don't publicize, interestingly, that it's the Nike Foundation, but they created something called girleffect.org, and they have a video that came out, I want to say it was like 6 or 7 years ago, and have you seen it? It's the dots. And anyway, if you go and you look online, and it starts off very slowly, and it's this wonderful video that they created. It's about 6 minutes long, about the power of investing in a girl internationally, which is great. There's also another organization, and we had them in town this past week at DU speaking. It's called World Pulse, and it was created by a woman named Jensina Larson, who was a journalist, and she was going around the world, and she was telling the stories of women, and or researching the stories of women, and they said, you've got to tell my story. Tell people back in the United States what I'm doing, and see if I can get help. Let it be known, and let me be heard, and let me be seen. And so she ended up creating a social networking platform that is connecting women all around the world, globally, and they're helping each other as entrepreneurs. They're helping each other as community leaders. They're sharing knowledge and expertise that's really important, and they're creating that technology penetration, because in many of these, like in the many of the countries in Africa, there's, the technology penetration is less than 10%, even though worldwide, I think we're at 50% now with cell phones, right? Something like that. So, sorry, those are just two fun things to look into also.
You intrigued me with the idea of four-year college piece being outdated. We've seen that. Can you share some of the thought processes that are going on? And could you do that just in the entrepreneurial area first, or where would that start?
Tell me what you're wondering specifically.
Well, what are the alternatives to the four-year degree?
Sure.
It's on demand. So it's on demand learning. It's where, I need it when I need it on the topic that I need it on, and I need it to be available yesterday. And so, looking at what those platforms are, and those platforms, frankly, are not being created by universities or colleges. They're being created by these edutech startups. The existential threat to the University of Denver is not Northwestern or Notre Dame. It is Coursera. It's those things. What we want to see going forward is, can we be a little bit more emergent in our certification? So can we do stackable credentials? Can we have badges and certificates that maybe you don't know exactly what you're headed in for, but you get something in coding? For example, we run an all-women's coding boot camp at the Women's College, and you spend 10 weeks and you get that coding certificate, but then you come back later and you want to do something in management, and you're kind of adding it all up, and what does that look like at the end? So I think those are important. The challenge that we are all trying to figure out is, the bachelor's degree. First of all, it was only about 6 months ago that I realized it was called a bachelor's degree. Fancy that, working in women's advancement for 20 years and going, wow, okay. So, but it's also, I mean, it was created 300 years ago as a proxy for societal and marital readiness. And today we use it as a bachelor's degree, but it's very frustrating, I think, to employers because it says nothing about the relevancy of the skill set to people. So I think we're looking at, it's something that can both build the bridge between employers and educators so that we can speak more clearly about what is this person ready to do upon graduation. And then we want to do it in a way that evolves so that we can answer the needs that people see and have on the employer side and on the employee side.
The crazy thing, though, on this education is we're doing a pendulum swing, right? All online, on demand, at home, no socialization, no communication skills. And then we're going to be like, oh, we didn't teach anybody how to work together, so we got to swing the pendulum the other way. So that because college kids, any employer knows, you relied on those 4 years for the kids to grow up, to get mature. Of course, I knew they weren't going to know how to code, but they learned something about interacting and about having to show up and do your homework and not fail. Like, you learned something. And so things are becoming skills, and you can do on-demand for skills all day long. In fact, in the tech industry, we've always had to do that because the language was outdated, right, and your professor didn't even know it. So you had to learn all the time. But the tech industry has taught us that didn't teach people a lot of these skills that now everybody and all employers know. Hey, we need people who know how to talk to each other and communicate and negotiate and all of these other skills. So unfortunately, I think the schools are going to shift a bit, and we're going to lose that unless they see that as this value. And corporate America does, and our dollars have to, and all of that balances out. But it does make me a little worried because the environment I've lived in is all of these techies who tend not to have those skills. We're going to have even less of those skills when you just do on demand from your house and you learned a skill in a coding class. It makes me nervous. Just
yes. And let me just add that it's going to be quite messy over the next few years, and people should get to understand that it will be messy. But I'm a firm believer of partnering with institutions with boots on the ground. That's really important because, of course, there are these wonderful organizations, these tech startups that are doing great stuff. But think of the combination of a really strong tech startup that partners with the Women's College and really massage this thing into something that actually is effective. And I still believe that we haven't seen it yet, but we will see it in short order. We have to, because we have this massive change happening, and you have all these people talking about, oh, we need to retrain the workers. That's not going to happen. I can tell you this right now. A 55-year-old guy is not going to say, I want to go back and get retrained. That's my personal opinion. Others would disagree with me. But I think that there are some ways of doing badging and credentialing in a way that allows them to be able to navigate the workplace no matter what their age, but the whole aspect of them going back and being quote-unquote retrained, which is what the government was trying to do under the Obama administration. It was being touted all the time. Retraining. It's not about retraining, it's about getting people the knowledge they need right now. So watch out when people use the term retraining. I think that's a dangerous place for us to be. Yeah.
Yeah, I had something really quick before you raise your hand. Yes, absolutely, completely agree in all aspects because we're losing our trades as well. The plumbers, the electricians, the people who get in there, do the hard work in our homes, in our workplace. But what I'm finding also is the millennial generation is brilliant. They've said, okay, so I want an education, but I want an education with an organization who has a purpose and something I believe in, right? So I can, there's a huge aspect right now in middle school and high school age group where you have to participate in community service. You have to, it's required for you to graduate. And it's required for you to go to high school. And so this community of younger generation are used to and really love to give back and are passionate about their voice and their message. How powerful would it be if we were able to incorporate in the education system, here's some of the causes and programs that we have that could be a huge draw-in for these kids to get offline and have that in-person interaction with the community. I go here because they believe in this, instead of I go here because they have an awesome media department, right? I mean, it's just a mind shift change, and that, you know, my daughters again are just a great case point for that. That they want, one of them wants to create manga, which is a magazine that you read backwards to forwards in Japan. You can only get certified on it to create an actual manga in Japan if you're a citizen. But you can become a citizen after 9 months. There's a whole little process. They've researched it. She's not even 16 years old. She knows how she's going to become a citizen of Japan and the cause that she's going to, you know, go toward it. So she's focused that way. Well, how cool would it be to incorporate international programs here as well as some community stuff? It'd be game changing in the next 10 years.
So we have one question over here. And
Hey, so I wanted to thank the panel first off because I think we touched on a lot of really important insights tonight. I think for myself and for kind of this room full of my fellow business owners and entrepreneurs, how might we kind of operationalize what we've talked about tonight? What are the action steps we might take to be better allies for female entrepreneurs and kind of give us some action steps for what we might do there?
I'm going to pick on language for just 1 second, which is I really firmly believe that the way of the future is not to have men as allies, because you are a gender also. So you can't be an ally to gender equity. You are in it, right? So anyway, I just want to say that because I think that it's one of the things that as soon as we use the word ally, we're putting men on the outside of the equation. And I think that we need to really have men be within the equation.
So what word could he have used?
So steward. I think a steward of gender equity is, thank you. That's great. No, it's a great point. It's a great point. And I'm glad I had that answer. Handy. I'm glad I had thought about that. And I think that it, you know, it really comes down to just being, starting with being aware is a place that we always like to start with. And that was why I was saying it's been so impressive to me to have so many male leaders and many of my male colleagues reaching out and saying, how do I do this and how do I do it in a way that works? So there's a lot of programming, but really it kind of comes down to some basic inclusive activity of checking in with people, right? How are you doing? How do you feel about where we're headed? Making sure that voices are getting heard. It's real that women sit at tables and feel not heard. It's real that we get talked over. It's real that ideas get moved and taken credit for. So those are all real things. So to be a protector for it, I have 2 male deans who sit on the Dean's Council with me, and they work really hard to circle back around to the female dean's ideas. We're very much in the minority at DU, and they'll say, you know, catching back up on that point that Anne had, can we, you know, follow up on that? That's really important. So anyway, those are my action items.
We should pass it this way too.
Yeah, I said this the last time I was here, and I wrote a blog about it not too long ago. You know, we're living in extraordinary times, which requires us to do extraordinary or take extraordinary measures. And my personal belief is that you're going to have to get out of your comfort zones. I think it's very easy for us to get confirmation bias and kind of float around amongst our friends. And that's a human tendency. But because of the fact that we live in extraordinary times, it requires us to go above and beyond what we're used to. And that means going and creating, even if it's just observational collaborative ventures, just to say, hey, listen, I just want to hang out with you, with women organizations, female freelancers, giggers, communities of color. You know, we usually don't want to do that. We give a lot of lip service to it, but we really have to extend ourselves in a way that we haven't before. So I would highly suggest that.
I would just add that women don't often ask for what they need, and they're not sure they can do it. And so if you want to help the woman entrepreneur, then continue to encourage her. And men's networks are broader. Men's networks are more diverse, men's networks are deeper, and they're connected to people that will help that woman be successful. So to me, you can reach out and pass a lead and help a person's business to get out of your comfort zone, and do that for a woman, and do that every month for a woman, not just one time. Have consistency to support the women businesses or whatever diversity you're trying to support, but do it consistently because they actually need that support. And that's just the statistics that will say that. So to be, instead of an ally, to be a steward is, and to get outside of your comfort zone, and instead of waiting till the legislation is changed, you yourself can do that. So support the woman business by passing a lead, by supporting her business, by taking her to lunch and sharing some of your skills and asking her, because she's most likely not going to ask for it, unfortunately.
That was the one word that came to my mind the second you asked that question, was just asking the question is the biggest step that anyone can take. And that goes on all levels. You know, you want to understand someone's diversity with their family, where they've come from. It doesn't matter. Just ask the question, be present. And I might not be able to relate to everything that you've gone through, but darn it, I can sure pause and put myself aside and try to understand and be present in that. So yeah, the question, you hit it, the nail on the head, my friends.
Well, unfortunately, we are out of time for questions. Thank you all very much. This has been an absolutely phenomenal experience.
We're going to be out of here within the next few minutes because our train leaves on time, it ends on time, and we're getting to that point where it's called the terminal, right, Bob?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, sir. First off, I want to point something out. For those of you who do have your own businesses, but you're running them from home, it may be good for your checkbook, but it's bad for your business. For those of you who live near here or within a reasonable drive, I'm told by certain forces in the building there's still some space available on this floor, and you should talk to Tom or Mikhail if you have the opportunity before you leave. One of the most important things that we can do, regardless of whom we're trying to support, is form community. Yeah, that's become a real popular phrase in America. It's as overworked as the stupid phrase soulpreneur and entrepreneur, because most of the people in this room are not entrepreneurs, they're self-employed professionals. And there's a big difference between those words. And I'm always amazed at the number of people who don't know what the difference is. And they're usually the ones who are giving the lectures on entrepreneurship. That's the thing I find amazing. Over the past year, we've worked very diligently to form community. Now, there's something that most of you don't know, and that's who's in this room. I'm always shocked to find out who's in the room, because it could be like at CATS, the strategic manager for one of the 20th largest landowners in America, which is code for a big-time developer. Thanks to Bob Briggs, there have been people in our room who are state legislators and stuff like that. You know, forming community is just not a buzzword for the left wing. It's just not. And I'm going to demonstrate to you. I made no effort to ask our advisory team to be here tonight. 2 advisory teams. And I looked around the audience and I was shocked. John, you're on one of our advisory teams, right? But not here. Jeff, you're on one of our advisory teams. Bob, you're on one of our advisory teams. Carol, you're an overachiever. You're on 2 of our advisory teams. And you might say, well, Anna had no choice because she was she was the moderator tonight. We have 6 people in this room who came from our advisory teams, not from the DaVinci community, which I think is a shame, because I think the DaVinci community is rich, because I've seen other people in other meetings here who are self-employed professionals. I think one or two of them is an entrepreneur. I don't know if it's a female or a male. So I'm going to do a reach out tonight. And here's my appeal. This is my ask. We purposely did not put an advisory team together for the DaVinci Institute till we were able to work some things out regarding our scheduling. If you want to give to the community, I'm going to give you the easiest, least expensive way of giving to the DaVinci Institute. Are you ready? If you're a bright person, nobody wants to say, well, I'm a dull person. If you're a bright person and you'd like to contribute to DaVinci, here's what we're going to ask you to do. Before you leave tonight, get a hold of Carol. Carol, wave to everybody so they know who you are. Okay? Or Anna, you know who Anna is because she's been up here for the duration tonight. So get a hold of them. You can get a hold of me. Pull out a business card. You don't have a business card, find some scrap paper. I hate to suggest it, but use the back page of our handout, cut off half of it, put your name, your phone number, and your email, and say, I'd like to contribute. And we'll talk to you about what an advisory team member does. Here's the best part of it. First rule, we don't ask any money from you. Second rule, if you find the programs are rich of quality, then guess what? Bring somebody to the next one with you. Number 3, our programming is pledged when we first sat down, when Anna and I sat down with Mikkel, right, and Tom. Tom sort of worked around the word vision, you know, what were we planning to do here, and Trent already knew. And what we plan to do here is return these programs to the future. Hey, mark that down. Maybe we can make a movie out of that, Anna. Okay? And that's exactly what we do. Our program was Techno-Apocalypse. The changes are going to come through AI and other things coming around the corner. The future transportation. Michael Cushman was on that panel. He did a stellar job along with Bob Briggs. Actually, no, you were in Techno-Apocalypse, and you the moderator. Yeah, you did a stellar job both times. Okay. So if you'd like to give, let us know. If you don't know if you're right for the advisory team, you can ask us. We're really good on giving opinions, not that they're worth a heck of a lot. By the way, our opinions are indicative of the qualities, indicative of the price you paid for them. Now, I'm going to do something that I've never done. I've done meetups since 1995. Yes, I'm that old. I know I don't look a day over 25, but I've been doing them since 1995. Back before the meetups.com thing did not dilute our audiences. So in those meetups, we had 100 to 150 people. If 95 showed up, we thought it was a failure. Okay? Everybody loves meetup.com. I hate it. All right. So here's the thing. You have an invite if you'd like to contribute to DaVinci, and you don't have to reach in your pocket. Although maybe Tom would say it would be nice if you could reach in and pull out a cool 50,000. We could work with that. And we need help. We need help from graphics people. We need help from marketing people. We need help from podcasters. We need help from videographers, from still photographers. So if you're a creative type and you say, I don't want to be on the advisory team, but I can help you in another way, please let us know. Your talents could mean a lot to our community. All right, that's my ask. If you have your own business and you don't think you need an advisory team, show up at CATS. Third Thursday, it's in your little handout. We've got a stellar team for that. Marty Wolf, who happens to be Carol's husband. Sarah Howard, who happens to be the wife of Jordan. And Carl Dakin, who I'm told is married. Okay. Oh, yeah. Adam Melnick. Now, I know he's married. He's got a really charming wife. Okay. So I got a quick question. I need one volunteer, and I need it really short so we can get out of here. Did anybody get anything out of tonight? Ma'am, you in the back? Could you tell me one thing that you got out of tonight? Come on, stand up. Give us your best routine.
One thing. How are you? You didn't think I was going to go.
Keep it close to your mouth. That's the way it works.
I know Ann knows that I'm not shy and demure, but I'm actually at a little loss for words. I wasn't sure what I was volunteering for. So, I came here as a, business person / entrepreneur, okay? And I love seeing all the people in the room who are of like mind. I got into this game about 5 years ago when I left corporate America. And sometimes you feel a little alone in the game, you know? Particularly women, because we don't always talk to each other as you guys articulated. So for me, I got kind of juiced. I'm like, okay, I'm not the only one that's on this path. I would have loved to have more conversation about, I say this with total respect, the older people in the room, like myself, versus all the young whippersnappers who are doing all the technology stuff. There are those of us, particularly women, who, we live longer. Corporate America says, we're done with you, and we're like, well, we're not done with life. And entrepreneurism is the perfect answer. So thank you for that.
Thank you. How about a nice round of applause for our panel? 2 minutes late, technical foul. Get the guy out of here. Thank you. Enjoy. Stick around, talk a little bit, get some business cards.